pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the February 21st Board of Public Affairs meeting. First on the agenda is to approve minutes for the February 7th meeting.
Chairman, I see no additions or corrections. I make a move we accept the minutes as printed.
I'll second.
Jim?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Next is a hearing of public concerns. Next, the clerk treasurer's report.
The board's been presented with the clerk treasurer's report for the month ending January 31st, 2017.
I make a motion, we accept the treasurer's report.
Second.
Karen?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Next is a presentation by Utility Financial Solutions, LLC, on the electric cost of service study and financial projections. Dawn Lund is going to do the presentation.
Great. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm Dawn Lund, Vice President of Utility Financial Solutions, and our firm provides cost of service, financial plans, rate designs, and special financial analysis for utilities across the country, Guam, Canada, and the Caribbean. So I appreciate you having us here tonight. We performed an electric cost of service study and a financial projection. Tonight I'm actually going to go through some mainly three key targets covering the financial projection, and I'm going to go through the results of the cost of service study, and I'm going to ask a little bit of direction from the board at the end of the meeting. I will try to keep my comments really concise and brief. I know, but in depth as much as you need. I know you have a long agenda tonight. So let's talk a little bit about what my objectives are. I'm going to review three key targets for the electric department. I'm going to tell you the range that you're in and kind of what the industry standards are. That typically helps you with your financial planning process to keep the utility healthy. And I'm going to talk about cost of service results, and in particular, I'm going to talk a little bit about your customer charge, which is that monthly customer charge that you're charging on your base rate schedules. Real quickly on some assumptions. Power supply, we projected at 2.5% increases each year. That's almost irrelevant because you do have a PCA, a power cost adjustment. Anything, if we over or understate that, it's going to naturally correct itself. You're going to see that overall the electric utility is healthy. That has been a big key indicator in keeping the electric key in keeping the electric utility healthy is that PCA. It's important you keep it. It's important you use the formula and not ever freeze that. Let the power supply costs flow through like they need to. Annual inflation on your other costs, we projected at 2.8%. Investment interest about 0.5%, and we'll talk a little bit about that capital plan. The first couple things that I'm going to review are the financial picture piece of this. Where you are today financially, where it looks like you're going to move into the future without any changes first. Then we're going to talk about any changes that I do recommend. So we're going to talk about some key targets, but what I wanted to show you first is a table of basically your overall financial health. That middle column, operating income, is where we're going to focus. That's one of the key targets I'm going to talk about. The second to the last column is that projected available cash. That's another element I'm going to talk about. And a third element that's not up there that we typically cover is debt coverage ratio. The utility doesn't hold any debt, so we're going to just breeze through that real quickly. But what we're going to concentrate on is operating income and our projected cash balances. You can see in this previous slide here, the operating income, I'm moving from a relatively healthy operating income of about $1.2 million, and over the 5-year projection period, That decreases to an operating income of about $320,000. That's just a natural decline in your financial position. That's mainly due to inflation. Again, any changes in power supply costs we're catching through that PCA. Our projected cash balance, actually my operating income, and I'm going to go into that target in detail in a couple slides and what that covers. We want that target to be right around $1 million. So in the first couple years, you are meeting your operating income target. After that, we slide a little bit on that key target, but I'm going to tell you how that's calculated here in a couple slides. And then our projected cash balance, obviously you can see that you're maintaining right around the balance that you're at. That's mainly because we're basically keeping overall healthy, and our capital improvement program is pretty stable at approximately $2 million a year. Now that capital improvement program, compared to what we were given, we did bump that up a little bit for projection purposes. Your system is about 66% depreciated. That's when we remove the old plant that, now that you're purchasing most of your power, we remove that. Your system is still about actually it's almost approaching 60% depreciated. We consider that definitely not an aged system, but an aging system, where you're probably most likely going to see some more aggressive capital improvements. So we did put that in the program, a little bit more aggressive capital improvements than what you had given us. And you might want to revisit that, and of course we can tweak that in the future if you need us to. But basically, the reason we probably have a little bit of cash there compared to our minimum of about $6 million that we would like you to hold at a minimum, that means cash critical, and I'm going to go over the assumptions in that minimum. You'll most likely be spending some of that possibly in the future for capital improvements, since you do have a little bit more of an aged system. We're going to talk about a cash reserve policy and how important that is too as we move through these slides. But I wanted to give you right up front a picture of where you are so we can really concentrate more on some policies like a cash reserve policy and the actual rate structure that I want to talk about. Basically, the electric utility is overall healthy. It looks like we may need some changes in 2020 and 2021 to stabilize that operating income. However, in between that time, we're going to talk about a revenue neutral rate adjustment. Your utility is healthy overall. The electric utility is healthy overall. However, there are some improvements you can make in your actual rate design. We're going to talk about customer charge. We're going to talk about the declining block rate system that you have. And we're going to talk about a cash reserve policy. So right now, we aren't projecting any rate increases needed until around 2020 just to stabilize that operating income. But in between that time, we're going to talk about some revenue neutral rate adjustments. Debt coverage ratio, I left this slide in here just to let the board know, although you do not have debt now, it's important to know that if you should issue debt in the future, there's an important financial target you have to meet to issue debt. One of them is your debt coverage ratio. In tandem to what the things a bond rating agency looks like are things like having a PCA, which you have, having a cash reserve policy, which you don't formally have now, and we'll talk about that. With this study, you were given the methodology, and I'm going to review that, for a cash reserve policy. So you're already a step ahead on that. AMP also in their ratings to you requires a cash reserve policy and requires a PCA. You currently use a 3-month rolling PCA. They require a minimum of a 6-month rolling PCA, so you've met that requirement. It's keeping you healthy. The next thing we can look at is this cash balance here and talking about a cash reserve policy. Our cash reserve policy, we basically look at 4 key areas. We look at O&M expenses, just those normal expenses that are flowing out the door. We look at your power supply expenses with the O&M. We look at your annual power supply cost is the next line. We look at your historical rate base in your system. We look at how old that is. If you have an aged system, we assume that you're going to need some cash reserves on hand for future capital replacement. There's a line item missing there called debt coverage, debt service reserve. I'm gonna, in your actual policy that we're gonna recommend for you, if the board chooses to have more information on that, I'm gonna add that line back in, because should you issue debt in the future, you wanna always be reserving that debt payment. It's not in this formula right now because you don't have debt, but that's an important indicator in the future to have in your cash reserve policy. The last line item there is the 5-year capital plan. We look at your 5-year capital plan, and we want to ensure that you are reserving the next year's capital improvements in the cash reserve. If you tell me you're gonna spend $2 million next year, I want you to have $2 million at the beginning of the construction year to start those projects. So I look at those key areas. Most cash reserves policies just look at O&M expenses and give you a certain amount of days of O&M. We look at these 5 key areas. They're unique to your utility. We assess the risk against those, and we recommend a policy based on that. Right now, without any debt, we're approaching recommending a minimum of about $6 million, which is about 95 days cash on hand. That's quite frankly low for a minimum. We like to see that minimum more up to the 120,000 or 120 day range. And the reason yours is so low is because you don't have that debt payment in there. Now, projected days cash on hand, you have about $12 million currently in the electric utility. That's about 200 days cash on hand. Highly bond rated utilities hold at least about 205 days cash on hand. That's one thing bond rating agencies look for. So when you look at your overall picture, you're currently meeting your operating income. It's projected to decline slightly over the projection period. You're currently meeting your minimum cash reserve, and you're meeting a cash reserve level that most bond rating agencies would consider very healthy for a highly rated utility, highly rated bond utility. We want to protect that though. This formula here that you have, if the board wants to consider establishing a formally adopted cash reserve policy where you would adopt this methodology to hold a minimum of $6 million at all times in reserves, a policy simply helps you for planning in the future. If you have an aggressive capital improvement plan, it can help guide you when to issue debt. It can just make sure that that cash is protected at the level that it is now. As there's changes in management and changes in boards and philosophies, it's also a highly rated credit scoring for your AMP. You've got the methodology now that was part of your program that we have done for you. You just need to adopt it formally. Yes?
Question, just OM means operating and maintenance?
Operating and maintenance expenses, yeah.
Okay, just for clarification.
Yep, great question. So we're healthy. Overall, our cash is healthy. Would highly recommend, you've got the methodology for a cash reserve policy. We might want to take a look at that in the future. Our operating income, that's the target that we see declining slightly. We're currently at about 1.2 million. We're declining slightly over the 5-year period to about $320,000 operating income. And what operating income is, a lot of questions I get is, should a municipal utility make an income? Should we make a profit? Well, this is a break-even rate of return. What we're recouping in this formula is interest expense on debt, which you have none, so we're not recouping any of that right now. And we're recouping the inflationary increase on the assets you have invested in the system. And what do I mean by that? Let's just pretend you have one asset. It has a 10-year life. I'm going to put in my revenue requirements for my rates every year $100,000. I'm going to take the million, divide it by 10, that's $100,000. I'm going to recoup that through my depreciation. But when I go to replace that asset in 10 years, that asset's going to cost me $1.3 million or something more. In my example, the $300,000 is what I'm recouping. So I'm preparing the utility to be able to have the cash on hand to replace assets in the future, not only the historical investment, but the future replacement value. That way, if we have rate adjustments, we're smoothing out those rate adjustments. We're not having real high jumped rate adjustments trying to catch up with that inflationary increase on our assets when we go to replace them. What we've calculated out for you is about a 6.8% rate of return. That's again just recouping the inflationary increase on your assets. Your system's approaching 60% depreciated. In general, that target across the country is on average where we like to at least see it be is 5 to 7%. You're perfectly within that range. Anytime we see over that 7% mark, it just simply means the system's aged. So we would like your rate of return to be right around that 6.8% mark, or about $1 million. So anytime we see that slipping, we're going to try to establish a rate adjustment that kind of brings that up and levels that out. And that's what we've done here. If you'll notice that middle column there, by putting the 1.5% rate adjustments in 2020 and 2021, I've simply just tried to stop the decrease in that operating income, okay? So those are the key financial targets we look at. Again, operating income is dropping, but you're currently meeting it. So in the future, we're going to be looking at some small rate adjustments. Our cash reserves are healthy currently and projected to be healthy. But one area you can improve is that cash reserve policy. That would help you just having that policy established. So are there any questions on the key targets that I review? And then I'm going to jump into the cost of service results. Okay. The cost of service results. These are actually pretty great results. If we were to perfectly meet our operating income, and this would have been on last year's numbers, we are not recommending this because you've already caught that up. The utility could have sustained about a 1.8% decrease. We wouldn't recommend that because every year you're kind of re-catching back up to that. But when we look at the classes, one of the things we look at for a cost of service study is any class subsidization. Is any class greatly subsidizing the other class? And if so, we want to straighten that out. When we look at results of a 1.8% decrease, I look at 10% on either side of that. Usage patterns from rate classes change every year. So we don't just look at 1 year and say these are the exact perfect results. We have to give ourselves a variance because customers use their electricity differently every year. So I look at a 10% variance from that number each way, and I say, is there anybody that jumps out at me? And there's really nobody that jumps out. They're basically, every class is within cost to serve. Now, we could say that large power, if anyone is going to jump out, that large power and that security lighting jump out. The security lighting is a low rate class, and that's pretty common. But we could decide what I'm recommending for you guys is a revenue neutral rate adjustment. I'm going to talk a little bit about your rate structure in the next slides, but what I want you to be thinking about is when I say revenue neutral rate adjustment, that means revenue neutral to the utility across in total. But we have to decide, we know our cost of service results show that there's no one greatly subsidizing anyone, but we do have to decide in our revenue neutral rate adjustment, do we want to give any leeway to fix maybe that large power? What it's showing right now is the large power could sustain a little bit of a decrease, and your residential and your general class could sustain a little bit of an increase. It's not, there's no one super subsidizing anybody. I want to make that clear. Again, this is only a one snapshot year in time, but if we want to fix that a little bit or work towards it in our revenue neutral rate design, should the board approve a revenue neutral rate design, you could give me a 2% bandwidth. So I could have some classes, mainly the residential and the general service class, go up slightly, maybe even a 0.5% each. And then I could give my large power maybe a 0.5% or 1% decrease or a 0.5% or something like that. I mean, I would have to design the rate. So we could do two things. We could do a revenue neutral overall, where each class is basically revenue neutral. They won't basically see a change in their bill, but the structure, the way they're being charged will change. And I'm going to talk about the importance of that in a minute. Or we could say, all right, in general, our cost of service results are good, but we could justify having a slight increase in the residential and general service class and a slight decrease in the large power. That's the direction I'm going to be looking for from the board. So I'm going to let you think about that, and we can jump back over to that. The next slide, this is why I'm recommending a revenue neutral rate adjustment. You currently charge $6.25 for your regular residential customer. The cost of service results of that is you should be charging $15.90. What does that customer charge recoup? It recoups things like a portion of the distribution system, about 30% of the distribution system. It recoups customer service, meter reading, billing, those things that do not change with usage. So to service your customer, whether they use 1 kilowatt hour or not, it's costing the utility $15.90. Now you're charging your customers $6.25. The question becomes, how can we be so healthy then? How can we be financially healthy? It's because you've rolled fixed cost recovery into the variable component. So the utility, the customer is paying the correct bill overall, but you're not charging it in the right manner. And why does this matter? Well, if we're in a period of declining sales due to general inflation, general economy, seasonal residents, the seasonal people that leave that are paying the $6.25, the year-round ratepayers are subsidizing your seasonal ratepayers right now. So they leave, they're paying the $6.25 and a minimal amount of kilowatt hour usage probably, and the seasonal customers are the ones here all year round using a lot of kilowatt hours that cost recovery is built into. They're subsidizing that year-round payer. So we should consider straightening slowly this out. I am not recommending moving from $6.25 to $15.90. We would most likely move from $6.25 to $7.25 or $7.50 and do this over a couple period of time. All right, 3 to 5 years, because we do not want to move too quickly. If I have a single elderly lady in the community that's maybe only using 300-400 kilowatt hours a month, and I change her bill from $6.25 and that small kilowatt hour usage, and I give her a $15.90 base fixed charge on a percentage basis, that's going to hurt our low users. So we have to do this slowly, okay? But we want to straighten that out for, it stabilizes the revenues of the utility. Think about distributed energy resources. You know, that's all sorts of things are coming up in the future we want to be prepared for. We want to be prepared to straighten out that subsidy of that seasonal customer. So when I talk about a revenue neutral rate design, it's mainly to fix this customer charge, get that up to where it should be. Now you've got a really interesting rate structure, and I'm almost going to wrap it up here. I don't want to go on too long here, but I want to just give you a little education of where you are with your rate structure. You charge $6.25 for your fixed charge. You charge a declining block rate. That means you have 2 tiers in your residential class. You charge the first tier, I apologize, I can't remember it right off the top of my head, but then you charge a second tier, a declining block rate. Now, that's definitely probably not the cost signal you're actually getting, and that's probably not a cost signal. Definitely it's not a conservation cost signal. It's basically saying the more you use, the less you pay. All right. What we can do, what's helped you having a declining block rate and pushing cost recovery in that first block is you've had such a low customer charge. So you've had a low customer charge, but you've had a high first tier. That kind of has helped balance each other out. But then you go to a tier where you drop off to a declining block rate. The board should also consider maybe straightening that out. Why do we have a declining block rate? It's not sending an energy conservation signal. It's really not probably cost justified on a cost to serve basis. I mean, the more your customers use, the less you're not paying. So those are 2 things to consider: revenue neutral rate adjustment, straightening out that customer charge, and possibly smoothing out those blocks. Yes, question?
So the person who's trying to conserve energy is staying within that first tier, and they're paying a higher rate, and the person who's really abusing it and using less power is really getting a benefit.
Exactly. So what you do is you have cost recovery. Your blocks, though, let me, because I don't want to, your blocks only have about a 15% variance. All right, so when you go from block 1 to block 2, it's about a 15% variance. In general, that would not be enough to get customers to react. So for example, if I had a 25% tier differential, which is what we usually recommend or look at, that gets customers motivated. So, so it's not super critical. You only have a 15% differential. If it's not there for a reason and we're doing these revenue neutral rate adjustments, it might be time to start looking at that and straightening that out.
But if our policy's not in line with what we're charging, it seems kind of backwards. If we really want to conserve, and we're talking about green energy, but our pricing is not reflective of that,
Right.
we need to kind of fix that.
Bill, I might add, that really only kicks in for our large power users, the two block system, because of the kilowatt number that you have to hit.
And that's an excellent point, because your large industrial customer drops off by like 40%. So you have a first couple tiers that aren't a very big differential. Then you have a very large, and that is to help your large industrial customers in the community. Now, when I talk about thank you for bringing that up, because when I talk about that, we can do this just straightening out for the residential and commercial customers if we want to, and have that declining block rate in place for that customer that's really a high load factor customer that we're trying to help stay in the community. And provide, they're typically the ones providing jobs and have that high load factor and using a lot of energy. So we can do that just for the residential class for sure, I would start with. And we can look at the commercial class, what types of customers are on that rate. But the industrial rate, we can keep that declining block rate. Good point. So, let's see, I think we're about what the direction I'm looking for from the board tonight. First of all, I'm here to answer any questions you have. Overall, the utility is healthy. You've got some good things in place. You've got the PCA in place, some things you can improve. Having a cash reserve policy, that's going to improve any bond rating in the future. That's going to improve your rating with AMP. You've got the methodology now. It's pretty much going to be a simple process. I can give you an example of what to approve, and we can move forward with that. On the rate design piece of this, I'm looking for direction on, first of all, do you want to have a revenue neutral rate design to fix some of these problems? If you do, when we go back and look at this slide here, do we want to have revenue neutral? Of course, we're going to have revenue neutral overall, but do we want to have revenue neutral within each class? Or do you want to give me a little bit of a bandwidth? And I would probably give the residential and the general service a slight increase, and that large power a slight decrease. So that's the direction I'm looking for. Would you like a revenue neutral rate adjustment? And if so, do you want to, in each class, revenue neutral, or just revenue neutral overall in the classes within your services are straightened out just a little bit?
Dawn, what we will do, what we need to give the board is, if you are going to not make this class neutral, all right, so you're going to maybe increase large power or decrease large power, increase revenue to the residential.
Yep.
An example of how it would affect the average electric bill. I mean, it may only be 20 cents with the revenue neutral that does that for the average residential customer, but it would be significant for the large power customer. I may not say 20 cents, I'm just saying.
Right, no, that's a good.
It wouldn't be very much of an increase.
Mm-hmm. So that will be my next step. If you want me to go back and design a revenue neutral rate adjustment, one by overall and one by slightly changing the residential and the general service, I can do that and give you an idea of what that would cost. I mean, how that would affect your residential customers. Yes.
Dawn, question, the slide where we had the customer monthly charge, so would that be part of that rate
Absolutely.
revenue neutral?
This is what I'd like to do. I would like to.
So you're going to bump that.
I'm going to bump that up, but probably only about $1.50,
Okay.
$2 max. I have to kind of get in there. That's the art part of this whole process, is that rate design. I look at the low user, 300,000 or 300 kilowatt hours, to the 1,500 kilowatt hour user, and I see how everybody is affected along that, because I don't want customer service reps to be, getting a bunch of calls on a bunch of complaints.
So that's the range in our system is 300 to 1,500? For
That's-
residential?
That, for residential, that would be a very low range and that would be a pretty high range. I don't know what your exact range is. Your average user,
No, that's fine, it's just
Yeah.
within that, that's fine.
is probably around 750. So I pick a big range and see how I affect them. I would like to change that customer charge slightly. We're not going to be able to move to the 1590. I would like to consider, why do we have that declining block rate, and maybe straightening that out with this rate design.
When I look at that, the large power and monthly charge seems a lot closer than when I look at the commercial or general service.
It's in the demand and the kilowatt hour charge.
Right.
Are there any other questions on your rate structure, the cost of service results, any of the financial targets?
I guess maybe the one thing I can't quite get my head wrapped around when you mention about one subsidizing another, I guess that, and maybe I'm a little bit confused, but
Whoops.
that always causes me issue.
Okay, let me explain this chart. In the perfect world, let's just pretend this is perfect. Again, every year, customers use their electricity differently, so we don't just look at this table and say this is perfect. We say this gives us a guide. But if this were a perfect table, it would say that you could have a 1.8% rate decrease overall to meet your targeted operating income. That perfect target 6.8% rate of return. You could have a 1.8% rate decrease. If I were to do this perfectly, I would give the residential customer a almost 0.5% decrease. I would give the general service a 1/10 of an increase. I would give security lighting a 5.4 increase, and I would give large power a 6.1% rate decrease. If you were just to look at this table in the perfect world, this is not what we're recommending. Right now, this is showing of a system that could have a 1.8% rate decrease. The large power is subsidizing the residential and the general service. Now, again, I want to emphasize, this is about as great of a cost of service study as you can have. I mean, I see them where you see a -6 and you see a 30% in the residential category. I mean, where it's way off, where the industrial is greatly subsidizing the residential, or the other way around. So this isn't critical, but there is a little bit of room for movement there if we wanted to move slightly towards these results. But this is a pretty good cost of service result.
The easy way to describe it, Jim, is your revenues compared to your expenses. In the residential, your revenues are less than are more than your revenues are less than your expenses, whereas in industrial they're higher,
Okay.
and that's why it's subsidized.
Okay, I understand that.
I think, Dawn, for the public, again, maybe just, and for me, the need for operating income, and why does a public utility need operating income and the recovery of all that assets and protection? Please do that one more time.
Yep. So a rate of return for a municipal utility is a break-even rate of return. It's only recouping two things. One is interest expense on debt, because it's below the operating income line and we want to for sure recoup it. You do not have interest expense. The second thing it recoups is the inflationary increase on the assets you have invested in the system. So you've invested assets historically, you're depreciating those assets, and when you go to replace those assets in the future, they're going to cost you something more than what you've historically recouped through rates. So we have to recoup that little extra, the inflationary increase on that asset, to keep rates smooth and to plan for that replacement. So it's a break-even rate of return. It is not to make money. There's no money flowing out to some investor. It is simply preparing to keep the utility and the infrastructure healthy and replaced. And again, your system is approaching about 60% depreciated. Now, that's not alarming or anything, but it's to be aware that most likely in the future, you will have larger capital improvements than what you've seen in the past. So we need to make sure we're funding that rate of return, because the more we're not funding that, the more behind you're getting. You have a 60% depreciated system. If we're not fully funding that, you're just getting more and more behind as you go to replace those in the future.
Good, thanks. Can you go back to the
Sure.
cash days supply?
Yep.
Or whatever that
Yep.
screen was.
Cash reserve.
Cash reserve, the 90, is that 96 or days or minimum?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And where we are now?
Okay,
currently?
you're at about 90, excuse me, okay, so when you go through the methodology that we go through, we come up with about 96 days minimum. That's cash critical, cash reserve I want you to have on hand.
And these
Okay.
are all projections. I see the top of the columns, correct?
Yep, these are all projected. Right now, you have $12 million minimum, or excuse me, $12 million in cash, and that's about a 200, teetering right around a 200 over the projection period day cash on hand. That, so you might say, okay, well, if we're recommending a minimum of 100 and you have 200, do we have too much cash? No, there's two things happening here. One, you have an aged a system that's older than the average. It's not aged, but it's older than the average. So you're probably going to be investing more in the future. Two, if you were to get rated by a bond rating agency, you don't have debt today, but you never know what's going to happen. One of the things they look at is your cash. Do you have cash on hand? How much? They like to see at least 205 days cash on hand. And do you have a cash reserve policy? So you meet one of those things. You have right now 200 days cash on hand, which could decrease in the future depending on your capital improvement program. But the piece you're missing here is a cash reserve policy. And you've maintained that $12 million, but I've seen utilities have $12 million and go down to $3 million within a 2-year period. And you say, what happened there? And it's change in management.
Maybe we should state it a different way. Maybe only 40% of the utility is not depreciated. So we can try to get the emphasis on, hey, there's only 40% left to depreciate. So
And,
you're going to have
that's-
some expense coming.
Right. That's in a 60% depreciated system isn't aged by any stretch of the imagination, but it's where, okay, make sure your capital improvement plan is where it should be. You might need to get a little bit more aggressive in that area.
Because we get questions from the public, well, why do you need to have $12 million?
Right. Well, you're right exactly where you should be by any measurement of a healthy utility. You're right where a highly rated bond agency would like you to be, but right behind that that's why I'm emphasizing you have almost 60% depreciated system. It's not old, but that's why you have a little bit of cash so you can manage those in the future, those improvements in the future.
But then if you don't prepare for that, let's see if I can say this right. If you don't prepare, if we're 60% depreciated now, and we don't prepare for that future capital improvements and do nothing, as that ages, then we're gonna have to, the outlay for our capital projects later on is gonna be substantially
Greater.
more, which would drive a big rate increase.
Right, and you're exactly right. Okay, start off right here. I have 0% rate increases. You can see your operating income falling. I'm starting to not fund everything I should be funding, okay? So I go over here and I put in a small, very small, that's less than inflationary, 2 years from now. 1.5% rate increases. I'm trying to stabilize that for exactly what you just said. If we keep doing that and saying, the consultant said we're a healthy utility and we have $12 million cash, let's just keep not having rate adjustments. Well, in your, 4 years from now, you're gonna be having 8% rate increase, double-digit increase, whatever it is. I'm trying to keep you something under inflation, so you're not gonna have those complaints, and I'm trying to keep you healthy, so you don't have those large increases in the future.
So I guess what the board is asking for is a couple different options on how to look at a rate stabilization for
A redesign,
residential.
yep.
The other thing, 2 different options on that. The other thing is I think we need to look at the formula and the policy for a
Cash
cash
reserve.
reserve.
Yeah.
I
You've got the formula there.
Yes.
I can, you know, if we want to move forward with that a little bit, I've got some examples on how you'd want to approve that.
Okay.
We can talk about that. Do you guys have any other questions?
So if you have this cash reserve policy and Dawn, work us through how it practically works, and a board then looks at rates, and then that becomes part of a reporting so you can see where you are.
Exactly. And the
Yeah.
reason it's so important is because exactly what you just said. It becomes part of the reporting. So the board all knows where you are with cash, where you should be and where you are. And it also requires action from the board. So what I see happen in a lot of utilities is you have cash, you're spending it down, you get below your minimum, and I say, what's gonna happen? What's the board gonna do? Nothing. You know, the board's not gonna do anything. Your cash reserve policy is gonna say, you know, should our cash reserve dip below the minimum, here are some options. We either need to cut expenses, we need to increase rates, or we need to bond for those needed capital improvements. So it requires action from the board, and it usually gives a funding period where we get back up to that minimum. Like maybe a 3-year period, we have to reach our minimum again. It's just a protection that we're keeping that cash balance where it should be and keeping the utility healthy, and you guys are looking at that with the reporting.
So it'd be something that, in a practical sense, that the board would see each month relative to where we are in that cash policy.
Because in the beginning of the meeting, we reported that you had financial statements, so it's gonna be part of that reporting.
It'll also factor into how we budget every year.
We get rated by AMP every year. We're at 95%. The 5% that we would like to see to push us to 100 this year would have been this cash reserve policy that rates us down 5%. So us bumping the cash reserve policy helps us, helps AMP, helps our reporting, helps our Moody's rating, helps everything.
And you've already done that as part of, we do that as part of our studies. We do that just naturally as part of our studies because it's so important.
I think it's been brought up before.
It has been.
But there's been some pushback, and I try to remember what the pushback against doing it was. I can't remember why they didn't do it.
I think initially part of the pushback on it was, when I started anyway, our cash balance was around $3 million. So it looked like we were jumping rates frequently as this cash is building up. And then you have a year like last year with the turbine, and you bump out $1.8 million just for a fix of a turbine very quickly, which is where Dawn's saying your cash reserves start to dip really fast. So I think it was in an effort to, let's get it up to where when we come in here for this presentation, it's not gonna be, well, you guys have really been slow to do the increases, your balances are too low. I think this result was, at least for me, was what I would have expected to see. And this is the first time I've seen this presentation from Dawn on our numbers. I didn't have it in advance. But I've seen her presentation at other studies and seminars that I've had to go to. So, I mean, I kind of knew where we should be trying to line up. And I'm excited about it. Rob and I just met with a couple of representatives from AMP, and I think they're kind of excited we're talking about it now because it helps everybody.
When's the last time we had a cost of service study?
Oh, it's been a while. I don't think it's been completely done like this since I've been here. Not on like a cash reserve basis or anything that I can recall.
So when you say revenue neutral, that means the total revenue is not gonna change, just the classes are gonna change a little bit inside that.
Well, it could be that the classes change a little bit inside that, or I am gonna make each class revenue neutral within itself, but I might add $2 or $1 to the customer charge, go from $6.50 to $7.50, but I'm gonna decrease that first block of kilowatt hour usage. So it balances out, but we're starting to correct that seasonal subsidy, and we're starting to put that customer charge where it should be for revenue stability, and should you see a lot of distributed energy resources in the future, it's gonna help stabilize your revenues.
We don't anticipate that. Our rates are too low.
Okay. Good presentation, thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time tonight. If you guys have any questions, make sure and pass them along to me, and I'll make sure and get it answered for you. The next time I'll do the rate design, it's up to you if you want me on site again, or I can even do it through a conference call where you can see my computer. And you'll hear my voice, you'll see my computer right up there, and I can show you the rate design that way.
Okay,
Be a good idea.
that'd be fine.
Great. Well,
Thank
good.
you,
Well,
Dawn.
thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Thanks, Don, appreciate it. Next is resolution to advertise for bids for the East Village addition underground electric replacement Phase C.
Resolution number 2. Resolution number 2, 2007, a resolution authorizing the Bryan Director of Utilities to advertise for the bids for the East Village Addition Underground Electric Replacement Project Phase C, according to the specifications set forth by Bryan Municipal Utilities. Mr. Chairman, this is the East Village Additional Electric Underground Project Phase C bid request, which will allow the electric department to upgrade the aging primary and secondary in this final area of East Village Addition. The project will affect around 13 homes in the East Village Addition. The geographical location of the project is located in the rear of the properties in the 1100, 1200 blocks of Bavarian Lane and the 100 block of Palmer Lane. There's approximately 600 feet of primary underground cable to be replaced and 152 feet of secondary underground triplex cable to be replaced as part of the project. If you want more information, Mr. Sullivan is here.
That'll complete the addition? Yeah.
Until we get to the part, that was put in the early 90s.
Is this the smallest part, the smallest section of the 3?
Yes.
Don't anticipate it would take very long to do it then, right? Are there any major hurdles like we had with Wendy's?
This is
Or
a
the
tight
park?
location with fences, very tight existing utilities. There is a factor there, I guess, of difficulty because of that. A lot of hand digging and stuff like that possible in this area.
That tied in behind the farm store then?
Yes.
Second.
Bill?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Next is a resolution authorizing the annual wage increase for BMU employees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is resolution number 3, 2017. A resolution authorizing an annual wage increase for Bryan Municipal Utilities hourly and salary employees. This is a resolution basically authorizing a 3% wage increase for non-bargaining employees. This resolution basically will increase the wages taking effect April 1st, 2017, and was budgeted for.
Any discussion?
Does that coincide with the union wage increase?
This is later in the report, we will begin negotiations with the collective bargaining agreement on Thursday and Friday.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
I'll second that.
Jim?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Karen?
Yep.
Bill?
Yes.
Okay, next will be a discussion on cable programming rates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the committee this past week, we discussed, actually 2 weeks ago, no, it was last week because we changed the date, didn't we? We discussed the increase in our programming costs, and annually we've tried to keep our rates as low as possible. And in the past, we've recommended passing the programming cost on to our customers. Basically, this is the fees that are charged by the networks to provide those services to our customers, like the ESPNs, the TNTs, the other networks. Our total cost increase this year is approximately, it's about $74,000. And it breaks down in different categories and cost factors, but the recommendation that we made to the committee, and I think the committee went along with, was to freeze our rates for 2017 and not pass these additional subscriber rates on for television. And our thinking on that is that we are in the process of evaluating the overall system in general for our communications, including our internet and our television. And more than likely, we will probably need to spend some money upgrading the system next year to keep it competitive and to keep the services where we get good quality. And that will more than likely involve some type of a rate increase. And so since we anticipate a possible rate increase next year, we don't want to lose any subscriptions this year by having another rate increase. So, and I'm not guaranteeing a rate increase next year, I'm just saying that I think if we do increase rates, we may lose some subscriptions, and we really don't want to lose any more subscriptions. So our recommendation to the committee was to not do anything with the rates. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Number of subscribers we have now?
Sure, we have, Joe put this thing together, it's hard to read. Okay, the number of subscribers we have for basic is 1,562, for extended basic 1,252, and for digital basic 249.
And unfortunately, you can't project a rate increase because you don't know what I like to call the thieves raise the programming costs. We don't know this. We don't know what they're going to do.
Well, that's what this is. This is the programming cost. And you're right, we also discussed that because the programmers are losing subscriptions at a significant rate also, that we were anticipating that they will probably restructure their rates in the future too, to keep from losing subscribers. And so by not losing our subscribers this year, we may not have this programming cost in the future.
Right.
Because of,
maybe they'll give us a break.
they may change the way that they do their programming so that those costs don't increase anymore. Because they are losing, and this is not news to most people that pay attention, people are dropping, their cable TV subscriptions because of the programming rates. So, but that's a good point,
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah, it's not news, but the ESPNs of the world and how they charge is they're losing revenue because they're losing subscribers.
Right. And their traditional plan is they're making up revenue by just charging more up to less subscribers, and we think that there's a point where they're not going to be able to do that.
Right.
That can only go
There's
so
a
far.
ceiling to that.
That's something that ESPN is playing with now with the new
ESPN, Fox
service.
Sports.
They have the package 1, package 2, and package 3
Yeah.
available. Seems to be working successfully according to their news.
As just to give you more information, as we discussed in the committee, if we were to pass the entire amount of the rate increase on to subscribers, our basic would go from $24.15 a month to increase by $1.49. Extended basic, I'm sorry, that would go up to. It's currently at. I'm sorry. It's currently at $24.14. So we go to.
Can you figure that out?
It's figured out. It's basically $3.11 for extended basic and 49 cents for digital basic. more per month. So $1.49, $3.11.49. Not a lot of money, but because it's not a lot of money, you know, maybe not raising our rates will keep people from dropping our services.
Good idea.
I just hope we have the capital then to make the investment if that's what we decide to do.
Well, this amount,
You don't believe it's gonna make or break it?
the total amount will not really have a significant impact on our budget at all. That's one of the other things we discussed. So what our capital investment may need to be next year, we're still working on those calculations. It's pretty complicated with all the nodes and the contact points and all the, you know, that technical stuff that Joe talks about. So, but it was our recommendation of the committee to actually not do a rate increase.
Yeah.
So if we want to do a rate increase, I can get that to the board, and then we can act on that next meeting if you'd like to do that. But with no recommendation for a rate increase, there's no action needs to be taken.
I think that's a good idea to leave it as we talked about in committee. No rate increases are for 2017, not to change a thing.
Correct.
See what happens next year. Or at the end of the year, hopefully these programs are still, as Rob alluded to, there's got to be a point where they've got to stop. They can't keep raising the programming costs to lesser customers. They're going to have to do something different. So maybe they'll give us a break. We'll see. Okay, thank you, Rob. Next is a request to hire a communications tech.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We respectfully request to hire Patrick Weil as a probationary communication technician 1. Patrick was previously employed by BMU from September 2007 through September 2014. During his time with us, he was a communication technician until March 2014, when he transferred to the electric department as a customer service. With his previous education work experience, Patrick possesses the knowledge and skills to start at the top of a communications technician 1 and progress upwardly as he continues to grow his knowledge and complete his courses through NCTI. This will place Patrick in the same job classification he was when he left the communications department. Patrick was a great asset to the communications department in his craftsmanship and his providing excellent customer service to our customers. Patrick has been away from BMU since 2014, but we still have customers call in and request him as the technician that is sent to their home. We're looking forward to having Patrick rejoin the BMU team. Any of you remember Patrick?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Good man.
I don't know him, I met him, and he seems like a pretty good guy.
He was good work.
His customer service skills were incredible. I mean, everybody liked Patrick. And Patrick was good at doing it, what he did. I hated to see him leave. I'm glad he come back.
I'll make a motion. We approve.
Second.
Jim?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Welcome back, Patrick.
Yes.
Next on the agenda is a request to hire a part-time utility engineering assistant 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We respectfully request to hire Hunter Durkin as a part-time utility engineering assistant 1. Hunter is currently enrolled at NWSC in the engineering program, majoring in electromechanical alternative energy programming. He has already completed an internship with the Henry County Engineering Department, where he used CAD to create and redesign utility maps and assist coworkers in the design of infrastructure. Hunter will graduate in December of 2017. Sharp kid, and if you want to hear any more, Nate's here to discuss him. But we highly recommend him as a part-time intern type employee.
Sound like a good fit, Nate?
Best we got, I mean, as far as kind of limited to find somebody that's what we're asking for in a small community to ask for
for everything. So he's a very knowledgeable young kid that I think can be trained, and hopefully he enjoys this type of work and maybe wants to make it his career.
How many interviews did you go through? Or applicants, whatever?
I think initially, I think we had 6 or 7 applicants. 3 of those applicants were just interested in internships, and we only had 3 that were interested in full-time positions. So
Wow.
it's a very small pool, and we have a couple more interviews for the full-time position that we're going to be having this week. But it's pretty limited. I mean, for what we're asking, there's just not a lot of job opportunities, so there's not a lot of schooling. And the ones that they do have at Northwest are just getting started enrolling, so there's really not a lot of graduates that have come out. So it's, we got plastics, engineering plastics and electrical and stuff like that, but it's for the civil side of it, it's a little, we live in a larger community, we've got a little better for it, but we have to deal with what we have.
Very good.
Well, you gotta start somewhere.
That's right, good training.
He's gonna, Hunter will then continue to go to school, so he's gonna work part-time?
He'll work full-time this summer.
Okay.
So then he'll go back to classes and probably just work part-time, when he's available. So we'll try to keep him on, like he goes back to school, continues his education, we'll continue to have this part-time, maybe 2 to 3 times a week, whatever we can do.
When you say part-time, is that like 20 hours, or is that?
Well, this summer he'll be, working pretty much 30.
This summer he'll work 40 hours, and then when he's back in school, around 20.
Thank you.
On Nate's recommendation, I move we approve.
Second.
Tom?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
We just forgot to send it around.
You got something down, didn't
Next is a request to post a part-time account clerk position.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We respectfully request to advertise for a part-time account clerk 1 position as budgeted. The position will assist the current account clerks, provide additional clerical support to department heads as needed, and provide front office coverage during the holidays and scheduled vacations. The job description is attached.
This is something we talked about a couple of times.
How many hours will this part-time clerk work?
Anywhere from 15 to 30, probably some weeks 8, some weeks more. It just depends on the coverage we need.
No? Okay, so it's not a set
No.
number every
No.
pay period?
Just like when the girls go on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Might be 2 days, might be
Yeah,
2 weeks.
I think we budgeted for an average of 20-hour work week, so
they? They report to you?
yes.
So moved.
Second.
Bill?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Next will be a discussion on city-owned rental properties.
At our last board meeting, Mr. Peppel asked, the public to comment or make, information known to the board as necessary. Since that time, we monitored phone calls, anybody from the public making any comments or anything. The utility itself received 3 phone calls, and basically, without giving names out, because I'm not planning to do that, one comment was, why put money in an old house that will be future tore down anyway? Another one was the option to offer the house for sale cheaply so it could be moved off the property. Third comment was, if the old homes are an eyesore, they should be taken down. And those were pretty much the feedback that we've gotten to this point from the general public. Any board members may have had other input directly to them, but for discussion purposes, that's entirely up to the board.
Discussion?
Yeah, I had some, the public made comments to me relative to, they thought we should just not be in the rental business in general. They didn't have any feeling whether we should tear the houses down or whatnot, just thought we shouldn't be involved in the rental business. So that was consensus from at least 6 individuals.
I just had one person contact me and ask me why the rent was so cheap. I didn't have an answer for him. I didn't say.
It is what it is, that's about all you can say.
Yeah.
Susie would like to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. Susie.
I just wanted to say, I don't think that they are an eyesore, but because I have invested my own time and money into the place I live. I've had it fertilized, I've kept the grass cut, I've repaired things on my own. I was doing that until I was told not to do it any further. And then I was told you guys requested contractors to do the work. So, I mean, I don't feel that it's being very justifiably looked at as what the people that rent these places have done as far as work. I have put my own money and time into my place to make it look respectable. And I have photos that shows what it looked like when I moved into it. And the board has not paid, or the utility has not paid for all the improvements. But I tried to keep it, I landscaped it, I cleaned it all up. I don't know. And I understand some of these were bought to tear down and to make expansions. I think some of them should be. Depending on which ones you're looking at, there could be some differences. Some of them I don't see why they need to be torn down.
I will say one thing without slamming any of the other tenants. Yours is not an eyesore.
I've put a lot
You've
of time
taken
and
good
money
care of
into
it.
mine.
I was impressed. So that's not the issue.
I think a lot of what brought this about was last summer on the walkthroughs, when we were between directors and looking at the properties and I don't want to say structural problems. I guess as landlords, you have to kind of cover your own rear end as far as safety and things like that goes. So I guess that's why we ended up investing some money in all of them, and I guess we're at that point right now. I guess, so the decision right now would be whether we want to continue with that, because with the conditions of the homes, there's going to be having to be money invested in them for maintenance. And I don't know. I'm just saying, Susie. I don't know, and this is only me speaking. I don't know that we could make a decision to go one way or another with an exception, if you know what I mean. And I'm not knocking your place, don't get me wrong. I know
No.
you've put a lot of work into it, but I don't know.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but a lot of these places are in the shape they are because of whoever took care of them before did not maintenance them. My house had not been maintenanced in 10 years
I know.
before I moved in. So, I mean, it's a difference of who's been in charge of those and authorizing it. I went through the same argument with trying to stain my deck to keep it from rotting, and the reason was asked why. Or I tried to replace the front steps before I fell. And I got that denied 3 times before I fell. And then I fall, and then it gets replaced. So,
And I understand that because I know exactly what you're saying. But we're at this point now where, because of that, there was not substantial repairs made through the years. We're at this point now that we're gonna have to invest some money in all 4 of them. And that's what we're trying to decide, is it worth it? We're not even 100% sure how we're gonna do this, or even if we are gonna do it, I don't know.
And to the best of my knowledge, as long as we've owned the houses, the rent has never been adjusted. So I mean, I'm just saying, the rent is low, so I guess you have to take that into consideration when you try to decide how much of an investment you want to put in each place.
but some of that is compared to, aren't 2 of them paid off?
Probably. But I don't know that makes,
We still, yeah. we
that
still-
makes any difference as far as.
Technically,
the
they're all paid
properties
off, we don't
go.
hold
No.
any debt on any of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're just gonna have to, there's some structural issues with some of them,
I realize that.
serious structure. And like Jim said, I don't wanna ever put the utility in a position to have something happen and us be sued, or, because we knew that was there, and eventually it's gonna have to be fixed, and it's gonna cost a lot of money. Is it worth it? There's a couple of them that, personally, I don't think you'd be putting a lot more money into them than you'd ever get out of them,
Mhm.
you know?
I agree.
See, I guess that's why I made the remark, I don't know how you can make a decision with exceptions.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
I mean, we either get into the business or get out of the business, I guess.
And that's the
in other
question.
words, you
we have
can't
to
agree,
answer.
Yeah.
what you're saying, Jim, basically you can't agree to tear down these 2 and
Exactly.
keep these 2, because renter C might have been
Yeah.
there longer. Yeah, you understand what we're saying, Susie?
Yeah, I understand, but I also see the advantage to taking down a couple of them for the utilities use. I mean, I don't have a problem with, I see where their advantage is to tear a couple of them down.
Yeah. And then, see, we had talked about, as we acquire them through attrition, then we can eliminate, or, you know, 1 at a time or whatever. So, I guess we just need to not make a decision tonight, but we need to just stay on this issue and
The days
discuss
come.
it. Because it seems like every time we talk about it, there's one little thing that keeps popping in that I gotta think about. I just wanna do the right thing.
Well, that you notice too, like last summer, I mean, the work, and I noticed in the bills tonight, some of the bills came through from some of the, I don't know what you call it, upgrades or something that we did to some of them, to railings and safety features, you know, so, you know, kind of help cover our liability. But I don't know if we want to go much further than that.
And it's a tough thing to do, it's a tough decision, Sue.
Yeah, it is.
Because, you know, some of our renters are our employees or our assets. That's a tough thing to do. I've known you a long time.
And I personally don't want to have to be the one that has to evict anybody, but then I'm not sure it's in the best interest of the utility to be a landlord either.
And I agree with what Jim said before, that it's got to be one way or the other. Unfortunately, you've kept up the place, well, fortunately, you've kept up the place, and we appreciate that, and that was brought up in the last meeting too, that it's gonna be a hard decision because of that. The decision we have to make is, are we in or are we out? And one way or the other, we have to decide,
Yeah, we have to make a call.
unfortunately.
I appreciate having the discussion. I think we should be out of the rental business, but I appreciate having a discussion, an open session about it, because I think everybody needs to know how we feel and what's going on. I think there's also, we're gonna have to develop, if we get out, we're gonna have to have Rob, you're gonna have to develop some sort of an exit strategy with which to be fair to our tenants and fair to everybody involved. If we get out, we're out.
I guess that would be my one request, is that if we do decide to get out of the business, we make it as painless for the renters as we can.
So is it the board's direction to me to develop some type of exit strategy to be considered?
I think we need that to make a decision. I think
Okay.
that's gonna have to be part of the decision, is the exit strategy, and how that's gonna play out.
I agree.
I'm still waiting to see some numbers on what it would cost to fix up some of these places that the board had considered if we do stay in it. I don't know that it's unanimous, we need to be out of the rental business. I don't think we voted on that or
No.
made a conscious decision. We talked about doing one because it's vacant, maybe getting rid of that one, or having another tenant, having a tenant somewhere else move into that one, so.
We can eliminate another.
So,
Yeah, well, that could work
the
into our,
worst of them
the
might be
exit
able to-
strategy. I mean, it's
So,
kind of what I
don't know what the improvement costs are. Well, I don't know what we're talking about, 1,000, 10,000
We
per home?
don't know either, and quite honestly, we haven't taken the time to have those numbers developed until we knew what the board's direction was. You know, if the board wants me to have a improvement strategy along with an exit strategy, I can develop both. You know, it's just a little more work.
Yeah, that's what we had talked about in the previous meeting, was to get some costs to analyze.
But I hope you understand, Susie.
Oh, I
A lot of what it is, and it's like they said, you know, don't think for a minute that we don't appreciate what you've done for the place. I know you've put a lot of work into it. But on the other hand, and I mean, you mentioned too about having contractors do some of the work. And that was one of the things I noticed last summer as we were doing walkthroughs. And not your place. I mean, as far as like painting or maybe changing electrical fixture or something like that, that's one thing. But one of the houses had some electrical work done to it. And that has to be done by code, if you know what I mean. And you come in and you see where it's been done, but it's not been done quite right. So then you have to bring somebody in and make it right, you know.
Well, yeah,
So
Bryan
just
had to
should have
do
been
that
done right in
when-
the first place, I guess what I'm
Bryan
saying.
did that when I moved into my place, because they ran
Right.
the wiring through the duct.
Exactly. Because we don't see anybody get hurt, and we sure don't want to burn the place down.
So if one of us would propose a motion, one way or the other, and we had a second, and it passed with majority, we'd know one way or the other. And could we make that motion anytime? Could be tonight, couldn't it?
Well, do we have a motion to come up with an exit strategy? Is that where we're at right now?
No, what I have is, I have a request to develop an exit strategy and a request to develop an improvement strategy.
Okay.
In case we
I don't,
decide.
at this point, there's been no formal board action on this issue at all. Mr. Sproul is asking if he makes a motion, that would be formal board action that could be done, correct? So that's entirely up to the board.
I'm not against renting the houses that are decent and that we can maintain for a period of time. If we're not gonna do anything with the property, if we knock down the houses, because that's what would have to happen if we do say that we're gonna get out of the rental business all 100%, all of those houses have to go. And that leaves the land vacant. I just wanna consider all options is what I would like to do. I'm not convinced that all of them need to be torn down. Maybe we have too many.
If you just get out of the rental business, you would be, not necessarily have to say that means you have to tear them down. They can still exist. You get,
Right.
You don't wanna leave a house empty, a vacant house standing, no.
Well,
I can't agree with that.
That's part of the exit strategy. You know, I would think that once they become vacant, we acquire them through attrition, then we can dispose of them.
That was
One
another
at a time.
decision, yeah.
We're not gonna leave them set there. We're gonna have to do something to eliminate them.
Is that what you were thinking about?
and then the suggestion was made that you could sell the house, you know, potentially, as opposed to destroying it. You could sell it to somebody and they move it.
Right.
To some other location. You
If
got
it
other
was
options.
structurally sound, but
I don't know how that works.
Seen a lot.
I mean, I've seen it done quite a
I've
few
seen a lot
times.
of them go
but-
off
oh,
High
yeah.
Street
Yeah.
for a buck.
Yeah, they sell
They were in
cheap.
bad shape and they still moved them.
Possibility.
I just don't know. I don't think we have all the information to really make a decision.
I think the decision is not how much you need information, it's whether you need to be in the rental business or not, whether you fix them up or not. I guess if you're gonna be in the rental business, then you gotta fix them up, that's no matter what it costs. If you're out, you're out, you don't have to fix them up at all. So I think it's pretty clear to me. I've got enough information to make a decision. So you could vote, if we have a resolution proposed and there's a second, you could vote no. Anybody can vote no or yes, however you want to do it. If it goes down, then there's nothing, no action. If it passes, then there's action.
I just thought I'd speak up and, I mean, you gave your opinion. Thought I would give mine as well.
Perfect. I think that's what, I appreciate having a discussion.
Would it be logical to come up with an exit strategy first before we make the final call?
I think
Well,
you could.
I would
I guess I-
suggest if there's a motion to, as Mr. Pep was saying, to get out of business, that's all the motion basically says, and then I would be inclined to develop an exit strategy for formal action for the board in the future.
To approve or disapprove?
Right.
So I think you've got all sorts of opportunities then to approve or disapprove how you're gonna do it.
Yeah.
Is the exit strategy 5 years? Is the exit strategy, 2 months? Is it, whatever?
Well, and that's for the board to
Right.
decide based on. I will tell you this, if I develop an exit strategy, I'll have multiple options for the board to choose from, as opposed to
That would be
yes or
good.
no.
Well, then I'm gonna take the leap and make a motion that we get out of the rental business, the home rental business.
I second.
Bill?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Dick?
No.
Karen?
No.
Jim?
Oh, boy.
I'm gonna say no, because I'd like to hear more.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
I'm not against it necessarily, but at this point, I'm gonna say no.
I'm like you, I'm not there yet.
Yeah. I'd like more info. Thank you.
So what info now is the board requesting, the original info? Exit strategy on top of an improvement strategy?
What would you like to see?
I would think that'd be
I don't need
appropriate.
to see it.
So it wouldn't be for me, I don't need to see. The exit strategy would be nice to see, just so you can get a move on that, but I think that's more for those.
I get, yeah.
who want- Those of you who want more information need it.
If the improvements prove to be out of reason, then I guess the decision will be easier to make, for me anyway.
Me too.
Improvements are kind of a vague
Yeah.
question. You've been to all the houses.
Yeah.
I mean, those improvements could be making the houses in A1 condition or livable. So those numbers can be across the spectrum.
But we had the one, I won't say an address but I've done that work before. I wouldn't put that kind of money in that foundation, no way. That's gonna cost you an arm and a leg. I mean, it's gonna be expensive.
Yeah, when you get to that point, it makes the decision a lot easier to make. I don't know. I guess I'd just like a little more information before.
Yeah, try that. Let's move on. Okay. Next is pay the bills.
So moved.
Second.
Bill?
Yes.
Karen?
Yep.
Dick?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Tom?
Yeah.
Next is comments from EPA and staff. Jim?
I really don't have anything to add. I'm about talked out.
Don?
Well, it was a good presentation by Dawn.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, we're happy to see that. I think we'll act on it, probably a lot of her recommendations. Susie, thank you for being here and speaking before the board.
I want to thank Susie for making her presentation and talking about it, because I think we need to talk about those things, and I'd like to talk about it in open session, so I appreciate that. I thought the cost study, or rate cost, but what LLC did was well done by Dawn. I like that. And I think there's a lot of good information there, and I want to thank Lori for her diligent service in helping the board through the years, trying to maintain a positive cash balance for all those funds, and how important that really is to remind us as we're stewards of those resources and what it does. So I think she confirmed everything that you've tried to get us to do. So congratulations on that.
Ditto to what they said. Plus, I hope everybody was aware that on Channel 3 and 4, we had the message rolling across the screen last night with the telephone service for yesterday afternoon and last evening. So in case of emergencies, that you can always count on Channel 3 and 4 showing what's going on and what you can do and who you can contact and how to get a hold of them. And perhaps we'll look into getting that on the channel guide, Channel 2 and 25, and which more customers are probably likely to look at than Channel 3 and 4, but just to make you aware of that. It's a good idea to do that.
Thanks, Karen. Nothing for me. Rob?
Just a few items. First, I will be attending the Kiwanis Club meeting on March 8th. The APP legislative rally is next week in Washington. Board members Pepple, Ford, and myself will be attending, along with Mayor Johnson. Yesterday, there was a significant communication outage in the city lasting all afternoon into the evening. We are in the process of evaluating our emergency plan concerning communications outages and looking at making some updates and changes to reflect what needs to be done in today's social media age to get information to the public during these type of emergencies. We will be negotiating with IBEW beginning on Thursday afternoon and continuing on Friday afternoon. And I have distributed a draft of proposed rule changes for BMU Electric for board to review in our rule book, and we will adopt, or ask for legislation to adopt that at the next meeting unless there's some changes and feedback from the board. And that's all I have.
Mayor?
Council met last night and they had a resolution to go out for bids for the new building at the fire training at the range, and that will go out for bid soon. We hired a new employee at the street department. We had a resignation at the wastewater department. C.R. Harrington as of 6/1/17. We'll post that position open. We appointed two to the CRA board to replace others. Joyce Walker will come on, as well as Dick Reed. And the Soccer Association, the parks, were presented to proceed with the soccer lights, and they'll probably be coming and asking you questions about that soon. But they asked council to proceed with that. So that's basically what went on last night.
Mayor? Rhonda?
No, sir.
Laura?
No, sir.
Sir? Al? Nate?
No.
Susie? Mr. Moore?
Nothing, thank you.
You look like you're going to sleep.
No, I'm all right.
He's
You
comfortable.
woke me up.
Okay, with that, we would like to go into executive session to discuss imminent litigation and consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to request an additional executive session for imminent litigation to include the 5 board members and the city attorney, please.
Oh, okay. Okay. We have a motion to take short recess.
Make so moved.
Second.
Jim?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.